Hey, y'all, I'm Andrea from Andrea Speaks TV, back to bring you more news and commentary you can use. Listen, I want to take a moment before I get started to say thank you so much for supporting the channel, for subscribing to the channel, for your comments, for your thoughts. I appreciate you, okay? Listen, I want to come on and talk to you about what's happening with this whole debt ceiling talk. And so I'm going to give you some information. I'm going to explain what exactly is the debt ceiling. And I want you to leave your comments below and we can have a discussion about it. So listen, y'all, in case you don't know, right? Because you know this is the place where you come to get your news and information. The Senate, okay, our Senate has, excuse me, our Senate has now passed the debt limit bill. And it was said to have put off a potential default, okay? Listen, y'all, I want to first talk about what is the debt ceiling. What does it mean when we hear that term debt ceiling, debt limit, okay? According to the U.S. Department of the Treasury, okay, I'm getting this information directly from their website, which is treasury.gov. The debt limit or debt ceiling, okay, is defined as the total amount of money. Okay, I'm giving you some context so you can better understand why this, is a significant story, and maybe why you and I should be concerned, okay? But nonetheless, the debt ceiling or debt limit is the total amount of money that the United States government is authorized to borrow to meet its existing legal obligations, okay, which include, okay, Social Security is one of them, Social Security and Medicare benefits, military salaries, interest on the national debt, tax refunds, and other payments, okay? The U.S. Department of the Treasury also says this, that the debt limit does not authorize new spending commitments. It simply allows the government to finance existing legal obligations that Congress both, hold on, y'all, let me make sure I get my words right. Okay, let me start over. I apologize. The debt limit, okay, according to the U.S. Department of the Treasury, does not authorize new spending commitments. It simply allows the government to finance existing legal obligation that Congresses and presidents of both parties have made in the past, okay? Failing to increase the debt limit would have catastrophic economic consequences, okay? That's why, for those of you all who, like me, if you were following these recent developments, you were wondering, okay, well, what decision are they going to make? Are they going to not come to some type of agreement? But of course, we all know how that goes, right? The article also says it would cause the government to default on its legal obligations, an unprecedented event in American history that would precipitate, had to make sure I said it right, y'all, okay, another financial crisis and threaten the jobs and savings of everyday Americans like you and I, putting the United States right back, the article says, in a deep economic hole, just as the country is recovering from the recent recession. Okay, now Congress, the information says, has always acted when called upon to raise the debt limit. Since 1960, Congress has acted 78 separate times to permanently raise, temporarily extend, or revise the definition of the debt limit. 49 times, however, under Republican presidents and 29 times under Democratic presidents. Congressional leaders in both parties have recognized that this is necessary, okay? So now I want to fast forward to what just currently happened this past Thursday, okay? So according to my news information, the final vote on Thursday night came after leaders put down a revolt. Okay, this is according to the New York Times now. The final vote on Thursday night came after leaders put down a revolt by some senators who raised concerns that the debt limit package would underfund the Pentagon. Okay, now let's listen to what they're saying, y'all, okay? After 2 weeks of political impasse, tense negotiations, and mounting economic anxiety, the Senate gave final approval on Thursday. Okay, this is according to the New York Times. The Senate gave final approval on Thursday night to bipartisan legislation suspending the debt limit and imposing new spending caps, sending it to President Biden, and ending the possibility of a government default. Okay, the final approval, or the approval by the Senate on a 63-36 vote, meaning 63 senators voted yes, 36 voted no. Let's see. Was there one vote? Aren't there 100 senators, y'all, 2 from each state? I wonder what happened. Maybe the article will mention it, but I gotta see what happened with that single vote, okay? Or maybe I'm wrong. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong, okay? So it looks like there were 99 votes, 63 yes, 36 no. What happened to 1 vote? But maybe it'll be mentioned in the article. If not, I'll do the research on that, okay? The approval by the Senate on a 63-36 vote brought to a close a political showdown that began brewing as soon as Republicans narrowly won the House in November. This is what the article is saying, y'all, okay? Promising to use their new majority and the threat of a default to try to extract spending and policy concessions from Mr. Biden, okay? Now, a lot of times when I read these articles, okay, again, I'm specifically reading from the New York Times. These are not necessarily my words, but you can kind of get a feel for, okay, which side, which political party the news source may be supporting, okay? But I'm just reporting the information to you, but you can kind of read between the lines and really see what's going on, right? Okay, now, according to the New York Times, the president refused for months to engage with Speaker Kevin McCarthy, but finally did so after the California Republican managed in April to pass a GOP fiscal plan, spurring negotiations with the White House that produced a compromise last weekend, okay? On Thursday night, President Biden cheered its passage. They're saying Mr. Biden, but not President Biden. I don't know what's up with that, but it says on Thursday night, President Biden cheered its passage, promising to sign it as soon as possible and address the nation from the Oval Office on Friday evening, okay? Here is a quote by, I believe, President Biden, who said, and I quote, "Tonight, senators from both parties voted to protect the hard-earned economic progress we have made and prevent a first-ever default by the United States," he said. "No one gets everything they want in a negotiation, but make no mistake, this bipartisan agreement is a big win for our economy and the American people." And that's what we're going to talk about. I want to know your thoughts. Is this bipartisan agreement, is it truly a big win for our economy and for the American people like you and I? Okay. The agreement, okay, here's what the agreement is about, or some of the talking points of the agreement. The agreement suspends the $31.4 trillion debt limit, okay? That's a lot of money, y'all. $31.4 trillion debt limit, okay? So listen very carefully, okay? These are the highlights of this agreement. The agreement suspends the $31.4 trillion debt limit until January 2025, okay? The year January 2025. Allowing, listen to this, y'all, allowing the government to borrow unlimited sums to pay its debts and ensuring that another fight will not occur before the next presidential election. Now think about that, y'all. So they're basically saying, okay, that in this agreement, they are suspending the $31.4 trillion debt limit. Okay, remember I first reported that the debt limit, according to the U.S. Treasury, is the total amount of money that the United States government is authorized to borrow to meet the legal obligations, such as paying out Social Security, Medicare benefit, for paying out Social Security and Medicare benefits, paying out military salaries, interest on the national debt, tax refunds, and other payments. So they're suspending that. Not only are they suspending the $31.4 trillion debt limit until January 2025, but they're also allowing the government to borrow unlimited sums of money to pay its debts and ensuring that another fight will not occur before the next presidential election. Now, that could be quite concerning, but please let me know your thoughts on that, okay? This agreement also sets new spending levels that will be tested as Congress begins to write its annual spending bills. Other policy changes on energy, project permitting, and work requirements on social benefits were also included, okay? And there were some concerns about that as well that I'll cover in this video, okay? Senator Chuck Schumer, you've heard me talk about him before, Democrat of New York, and the majority leader had this to say, and I quote, "We saved the country from the scourge of default," okay? The Senate vote came after an afternoon of closed-door talks to resolve a last-minute flare-up over Pentagon funding, ignited by Republicans who said that the debt limit package severely underfunded the military. Okay, now we've talked about here on the channel, we've talked about how a lot of countries, don't quite seem to be happy with a lot of the decisions that have been made by our officials here in the U.S. And so, you know, tensions, what I'm really saying is tensions with other countries seem to be quite high. We talked a few months ago where, remember, there was this alleged spy balloon that somehow got into the airspace of our country, and it was said to have gathered some type of surveillance data, you know. So based on that and other things that have occurred over these past several months or even year, it does not seem like, you know, we would need to underfund our military at all. If anything, it seems like we would need to put more resources towards our military to, you know, to protect our country, the people, you know, our resources and things like that. But you all, please let me know your thoughts on that. So that is a concern that I share as well. Again, the Senate vote came after an afternoon of closed-door talks to resolve a last-minute flare-up over Pentagon funding, ignited by Republicans who said the debt limit package severely underfunded the military. Senate leaders resolved the dispute with a formal statement that the debt limit deal, and I quote, does nothing to limit the Senate's ability to appropriate emergency supplemental funds to ensure our military capabilities. Okay, let's see. I'm just kind of skimming through the information. Let's see. Democrats, the article says, contended that the entire debt limit episode should have never occurred and that Mr. McCarthy should not be rewarded for using the nation's economy as a hostage to win spending cuts. But they said the prospect of a default needed to be avoided at all costs. Okay. And then, you know, there were some other comments made by Congress members as well. The debt limit agreement, which was approved overwhelmingly by the House on Wednesday night, increases Pentagon spending to $886 billion. Okay, that is billion with a B, for next year, a 3% rise. But the article says Republican backers of higher spending for the military noted that would not keep pace with inflation and argued that the package fell far short of what was needed. Okay, here's a quote by Mr. Graham, who said to my House colleagues, "I can't believe you did this." Okay, Mr. Graham said earlier in the day, accusing the architects of the measure of undercutting the military at a time of rising threats. That's what I just said, y'all. At a time of rising threats from Russia and China. In fact, Mr. Graham was quoted as saying, and I quote, "This budget is a win for China." Okay, what do you all think about that information? Mr. Graham and others insisted at minimum on a commitment that Congress would later act on an additional funding bill to beef up the spending, although this would in effect reduce the savings Republicans had hoped to achieve through their debt limit deal. Okay. Let's see. Let me keep going. Okay, there were a lot of concerns about preventing a default. It says, even as the deal migrated across the Capitol, the effects of the debt limit continued to pinch. The Treasury Department announced on Thursday that it would delay auctions of 3-month and 6-month, and I quote, bills, short-term debt that the government no longer has room to take on until the borrowing cap is suspended. Okay. As part of the deal to move forward with final votes on the bill, multiple senators secured votes on proposed changes. Mr. Schumer, it says, was determined to defeat all of them, as any alteration, would force the measure back to the House, where no action would be likely to occur before the default deadline. Okay. Any change to this bill that forces us to send it back to the House will be entirely unacceptable. He said it would almost guarantee default. Let's see. After driving much of the legislative agenda the previous 2 years, the Senate left negotiating on the debt limit to Mr. Biden and Mr. McCarthy, whose demand for spending cuts and other policy changes brought the country to the brink of default. Okay, that's been a lot of talks these past several weeks. Nearly all Republican senators signed a letter backing Mr. McCarthy in the effort. As a result, senators had little influence over the negotiations and were forced to approve legislation they did not help shape. It was leaving some frustrated. Okay. Let's see. And that's pretty much the gist of the article. Let me see if I can find some information about some of the more specific provisions. If y'all hear like a little sound, I got my USB fan here. Let me see. My little USB fan is blowing. I have it hooked up to my generator. And all you do is, hey, let me give y'all a survival tip, right? This is something you can think about. They make little fans like this, okay? You don't have to plug it into an electrical outlet. You don't have to plug it into an electrical outlet. All you need is just a USB. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? USB, and you can just plug it into a generator, and boom, your fan is going, okay? So if you hear a little sound in the background, I should have told y'all that in the beginning, but it's okay. Now, I want to talk about some work requirements that a lot of people seem to be in an uproar. Excuse me. The new work requirements for food stamps, okay, that are in this debt ceiling agreement, okay. There's some new SNAP work requirements, okay, and let me explain them. So 4 ways the debt deal could affect who's eligible for benefits such as SNAP, S-N-A-P, and TANF, that's T-A-N-F, okay. Let's see, one of the central issues in the Fiscal Responsibilities Act of 2023, now making its way to the Senate, okay, and we already know that this is taking place. That's what it's called, the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023, okay. You can do some more research on that. One of the central issues in the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023 are the work requirements that Republicans have demanded for many low-income Americans let me start over, y'all. Okay, some of the words, as I'm reading, I'm kind of getting it mixed up. I know how to read, right? Republicans have demanded for many low-income Americans who have depended on nutrition assistance programs, okay? The agreement, which passed the House on Wednesday night, we know it's been voted on by the Senate, ultimately would institute new requirements for individuals who get benefits through the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, S-N-A-P, acronym SNAP, and Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, which is TANF, T-A-N-F, okay? If it passes, which we know it has, this plan would be the first major deficit-reducing budget agreement in almost a dozen years and would signal Washington is serious about making progress in addressing our mounting national debt, okay? That's according to McGinnis, president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, okay? But in a twist, the article says these changes could actually make these programs more expensive for the government in the long run because more people would end up qualifying for aid, according to an analysis, according to the Washington Post, according to an analysis by the Congressional Budget Office, okay? Excuse me, our federal spending for SNAP and TANF is expected to rise by about $2.1 billion in the next 10 years, the analysis found. Now, I haven't looked at the analysis, okay? They have a link here. I'll, maybe look at that and cover that in another video. But again, y'all, as food prices increase, as there are food shortages, there may be more families, okay, that are in need of assistance that could qualify for assistance. We've talked about food shortages, food prices, food availability here on the channel. And so they're saying that based on that, it could have an effect on the federal spending, because more people would be in need and potentially qualify for the program, okay? Here are 4 things to know about the requirements in the proposed debt deal. One is, according to the Washington Post, older Americans on SNAP would face new work requirements, okay? The current rules for SNAP benefits, which used to be called food stamps, require that adults up to age 49 work or participate in a training program for at least 80 hours a month. There are certain exceptions, though, including for people who are pregnant, have mental or physical limitations, or live with children. If the new deal is passed, which at this time of the video it has, the work requirements would apply to a new group: adults without dependents between 50 and 52 starting in October, and adults as old as 54 beginning next fall, okay? The new requirements could put hundreds of thousands of additional adults at risk of losing food assistance, according to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, a left-leaning think tank. This is what the Washington Post is saying, y'all. Many older adults work part-time jobs as crossing guards, store greeters, or seasonal workers, for example, with hours that may not add up to 80 per month. Okay. Here's a quote that says, here's a quote by Ty Jones Cox, who is the Vice President of Food Assistance at CBPP, who had this to say. The Center, that's the acronym for Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. And I quote, when we look at the older group, especially those with no children in the home and who aren't eligible for other programs, they may be in jobs where they have had to work with their hands and bodies for years, making it harder to work in their 50s, okay? He was also quoted as saying, and I quote, these individuals may have a hard time finding another job, retraining, or engaging in a new opportunity. Okay, please share your thoughts in the comments as you listen to the information being presented in the video, okay? The second thing you need to know, veterans, okay, the homeless and young adults who recently left foster care will be exempt from SNAP work requirements, okay? But the article says, the Washington Post, but the new legislation would also create new exceptions on who is required to work, okay? Veterans, homeless people, and adults ages 18 to 24 who were previously in foster care will be newly exempt from the work requirement, all right? For the first time, the article says Americans who are homeless will not need to meet work requirements to qualify for SNAP benefits, okay? And we know that in several cities throughout the country, several cities, several communities, the homeless population is rising, okay? So they're saying that for the first time, Americans who are homeless will not need to meet work requirements to qualify for SNAP benefits, Housing and Urban Development Secretary Marsha L. Fudge said on Twitter. This includes people who are unsheltered, living in shelters, or temporarily living in someone else's home, she said. Okay. As a result of this, the Congressional Budget Office expects that more people, an additional 78,000 per month, y'all, on average, will qualify for SNAP benefits between 2025 and 2030, resulting in $1.8 billion in extra spending. Okay, think about what's already happening with our food availability, food prices, food shortage. They're projecting, okay, between 2025 and 2030. Okay, y'all, haven't we talked about 2030 on the channel? It's a lot seem to be going on. It seemed like 2030 is some type of target year, right? They're saying that between 2025, which is what, 2 years away, right? A little bit less than 2 years away, and 2030, they're projecting that an additional 78,000 people per month will qualify for SNAP benefits. Think about that, y'all, okay? In another video, previous video I did, I talked about how there are some changes. They're trying to make changes, if they haven't already, to the type of foods that you can purchase through the SNAP program. I'll give you all an update on that later. Listen, y'all, the extra funding and new exemptions will help some families who have had to make do after pandemic era boost to food stamps ended in March, okay? Something else that you need to know. The third thing, states can still waive work requirements, though there are new wrinkles, okay? States will still be able to waive work requirements in areas with insufficient jobs under the new rules. And then in parentheses, it says, the article on the Washington Post says, an earlier Republican proposal had sought to restrict states' ability to issue waivers. Okay, I guess this news source wanted to point that out. However, there could be some changes to how states dole out exemptions. Under current rules, states are allowed to waive work requirements for a limited number of people. Unused exemptions can be carried over indefinitely by states, which can stockpile them for future years. Okay, but under the bill, states would receive fewer monthly exemptions and would be able to carry over unused exemptions for only 1 year. Okay, so that could potentially be a concern for some states and some communities where this normally would be put into place. Okay, the fourth thing that you need to know about, and I'll close here, enhanced work requirements for TANF benefits in most states. Okay, TANF, a program that provides temporary cash for families in need, is also facing potential changes, though the actual impact on recipients will vary by state. Okay, states design their own programs for the benefits, but are required to make sure that at least 50% of recipients are working. Okay, states can effectively reduce that 50% threshold based on how much their caseloads have fallen since 2005. Excuse me. For example, if the number of families receiving benefits has fallen by 20% since 2005, then only 30% of families will be required to meet work standards. Okay, the new proposal overhauls that framework and sets a comparison year to 2015 instead of 2005. Okay, this means more states would have to boost their work requirements accordingly. States would have 2 years to implement the new rules. They can also lower their work participation requirements by contributing more state funding toward TANF benefits. Now, listen, y'all, I'm going to give you something to think about, okay? They're changing the work requirements, but as I'm going to some of these stores looking around, I'm seeing more self-checkout, okay? Now, I know some industries, for example, like, farming, different areas like that, you may not necessarily have self-checkout. You got to, there's physical labor involved, human involvement. So at the same time that the work requirement is changing, you also have AI and robots who are taking away the need for human labor, and they're replacing with artificial intelligence, robot labor. So y'all, I'm telling you, a lot of this looks by design to me, but I would like to know your thoughts in the comments. Okay, thank you all so much for tuning in. I appreciate your support. I'm going to keep you updated on this story. Okay, I need for you to like this video, share this video, leave a comment below. I like to read your comments. Y'all know I comment back. And again, thank you so much for your support. Okay, keep preparing. Make sure you have your emergency food supply, your survival needs. Y'all see what's happening right now. You may say, okay, Andrea, I don't receive these benefits, has nothing to do with me. It's still going to affect you, because guess what? Under this program, they're already projecting, due to the changes, the work requirements, and other key highlights, they're already projecting that there are more people who are going to be qualifying for these programs. So guess what? That's more people in need of food, more people who have access to more food, okay, because of the amount of money they're being allocated, extended. And guess what? It could potentially mean less for you. So again, y'all, have your emergency food supply, your survival needs, have food stocked up. Make sure you're adding water to your emergency food supply. And we're going to continue this conversation in another video, okay? Make sure that if you're watching this video, okay, make sure you leave a comment below. Thank you so much. See you soon.